housekeeping items. For those of you new to Unify Corporation, we're a publicly traded software company that's been in business for over 30 years. And we're known for being the first to deliver a relational database in a Unix environment. And since then, we've delivered development software products that run across different databases and platforms, really geared towards the business application developer who places a premium on productivity over low-level coding. Today, our business has expanded beyond database and development tools, additionally into migration solutions as well as archiving and e-discovery. Now, we encourage questions on the webinar, and the way you do that is to use the Q&A button on your WebEx toolbar. It's a button with a question mark. And there's also a chat button, but it makes it easier for Jean-Marc and I to look in one panel for the questions just to make sure we address all of them. Now, I mentioned Jean-Marc, who is our presenter today, and we have a lot of people on the webinar, and my guess is that many of you, if not all of you, have spoken with Jean-Marc in the past. He's one of our senior technical support engineers who works on team development. And it's a real great opportunity to have someone of Jean-Marc's caliber presenting today because not only does he support our customers with their technical questions, but he's actually been involved in supporting a lot of their migrations up to 6.0 and to TD6.net. So someone with his background of both team developer as well as his familiarity with what we've been doing on the .net side, please feel free to use him, ask questions. It's a great opportunity to have someone like Jean-Marc presenting for us today.
Hello, Matt. Should I start?
Jean-Marc, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Should I start?
Yes, please go ahead.
All right. Good afternoon if you're calling from Europe, and good morning if you're calling from outside Europe. Today we're going to talk about calling .NET Class from a Win32 application. I think it's a quite interesting presentation, also feature. The possibility since Team Developer 6.0 to be able to consume assembly, and for the people that still like to use their legacy application, not have the burden to migrate the application to .NET fully, yet being able to consume the features of .NET by calling .NET Assembly through Win32 applications. So the agenda for today, what we're going to really briefly overlook, because as you can imagine, the features in .NET is huge. We're going to have very quickly discuss about some highlights on .NET concept. Then we're going to talk very briefly about Global Assembly Cache, what that is. Then we're going to have a look step by step how to consume assembly using something new in Team Developer 6, that is the .NET Explorer. We're going to briefly talk about exception. I feel there's going to be quite some question in this area. And then finally, we're going to talk about deploying GAIL type application on, for example, on Windows XP, because this caused some problem for some customers. So about the .NET framework, it's as everybody knows, it's a framework, and generally it's installed already on most of the computers. Actually, if you're using Windows 7, you already do have the .NET framework 3.5 installed by default. Actually, you can compare it like a class library, and its name is a base class library, the BCL, and it provides large range of features. I like, in a way, to always compare to existing issue, because as you know, nothing is created, everything transforms. And here, Microsoft actually just did the things better. At the time, we were talking about Microsoft Foundation class, which was also a framework, a huge class library. And all this changed. The base class library of the .NET framework is a bit the equivalent, but with new technology and definitely much more feature that you can actually use. I apologize over here because I had actually problems, to link directly from the PowerPoint application to Microsoft Internet Explorer. So I already prepared this. Let me just have a look. Yes, let me go into, not this guy. It's just that I had a problem. So here's actually the class library. You can get access to the MSDN and on the internet and check all what this class library is all about. And as you can see, it's huge. It's extremely huge. There are tons of features for you to actually explore and see how you could use in your application. So that's for the BCL or the .NET framework. So it includes a common language infrastructure that manages execution of program. We will talk about runtime of .NET framework. And support multiple programming language. Everybody knows that .NET, you have VB.NET, you have C#, you have many languages actually running on .NET. And since Team Developer 6.0, we do also use .NET, or you can actually generate managed code in Team Developer. So program can utilize code written in other language. An assembly, so what is an assembly? An assembly is a compiled code library for using deployment and versioning and security. What that means over here is that you can definitely not compare it as COM object, you know, a binary library that you could reuse, but the features in some way are identical. The idea is to be able to call a binary library and call features in it. The difference, though, is that the way you deploy it, the way you are versioning, you know, your binary library, so-called, and security are very different in .NET. That makes it much more secure and more easy to deploy. So it consists of one or more files called modules. Typically, you'll see that .NET class libraries are DLL files, but assemblies are also executable files. So an executable file is also an assembly. Net assembly are building blocks for .NET Framework application. If you look at in the GSE, if you look at those places, you will see that they are all assemblies. .NET Frameworks are just collections of assemblies. Net assembly contains the common intermediate language, which is CIL. We will discuss that a bit later on. And net assembly can have version information, which helps eliminate conflict between applications caused by shared assembly. COM actually resolved quite well this problem of versioning, simply because there is no DLL name, but there is, as you know, GUI ID, and you don't have any problems actually of versioning when you are on the COM. With .NET, there is some slight differences that makes the system better. All the idea is to get away of a direct DLL interface and the possibility to have conflict with versions. Actually, if there are version problem with the .NET assembly, you're probably going to get a runtime error saying that you tried to use a different version of an assembly which wasn't meant to run with what you tried to do. So it's definitely a very important aspect, you know, versioning of the .NET assembly. So what is the common language runtime? The CLR, so that's the CLR, is Microsoft implementation of the common language infrastructure, CLI, which we talked about, which define execution environment for program. So developer using the CLR write code in language, as we talk C#, VB.NET, and now Team Developer 6.0. At compile time, .NET compiler converts such a code into CIL code. The important things in this slide here is the runtime. What is really important, let me go previous. What is really important that you understand is that when you're going to build a .NET application, now with TD.6, if you are targeting for .NET application, you're going to have managed code. And this managed code is going to be executed by the command language runtime, which has an amazing feature. We are not talking about executing binary code statically compiled. It's still compiled code, but it's actually dynamically compiled. The idea behind that is to get best performance in executing your code, but also have a high level of accessibility, especially if you are debugging on the symbolic way. Because as you know, if you compile statically, everything becomes binary. And if you like to debug this code, it's going to be very hard because you're going to have to debug it on the assembly level. Here with .NET Assembly, people probably know LDASM. There is a way of actually decompiling code, .NET code. So here I just wanted to say that the feature here is to be able to execute much more fast codes that are .NET, and TD.NET 6 build target takes a great advantage of it simply because we don't need to use anymore our runtime. which is CDLLI, and it's totally managed by the .NET framework and by the common language runtime, and it's dynamically compiled. Therefore, the performance are really much better. So when we are talking about assembly, we can talk about, so let's imagine that you have DLLs. Those DLLs, you can put them in a central repository, which is the global assembly cache, but you're not obliged to put them neither here. You don't want to register them. I don't know if the term registering for assembly is a proper one. What this screenshot shows you over there, that typically in your Windows directory, assembly folder, you're going to have a list of all assembly that got registered on your computer. We're talking about version over here. What you can see over here in this property is the file version and not the assembly version, because indeed they can be different. So you have two aspects of version in assembly, which is the assembly version, which appears over here, and the file version. This is important when you need to update assembly, and actually when we are doing EMP, the assembly version for a certain version of Team Developer, let's say 6.0, stays the same, but when you apply an EMP, only the file version changes, so that it stays on the GAC, and so basically you have two different versions. So the GAC is a central repository, and if you like to register assembly that you did, this is a bit outside the context of the presentation, you have to strongly name them. It's basically generate an equivalent of a certificate and put them so that you can put them and register them in the GSE. Non-assembly that are not on the GSE doesn't require that. Actually, there are a couple of tools. Those tools are provided in the NATE framework. When you have it, generally you should really use them. An installer and all that shouldn't ask you to use a GSE util. At the time when we did the EMP, the first EMP on TD 6.0, EMP stands for emergency patch. What happened is that we actually asked the people to manually update the assembly, and that caused a couple of problems. So GSE util is just a utility, a command line utility that allows you to register assembly. What's nice about this place over here is that you can drag and drop your strongly named assembly, register them, or uninstall them. All right. So that's the GSE. What I recommend you, I will see at the end of the presentation, is to always have a look on the internet if you want to know more about assemblies. We did the white paper about assemblies, so you have much more information about that. Of course, on the internet, you have a lot of information. So that was a very brief overview of what is the .NET framework and what are assemblies. So now let's go back to the topic that interests us today, that is consuming assembly on Win32. For being able to consume .NET assembly, for the people that knows about Visual Studio, .NET, you know that typically when you want to consume an assembly, you're going to have to actually reference the assembly that you want to use. Whether this assembly is on the GSC or as a local assembly, not registered on the GSC, doesn't matter. It's just that you have to reference it. In Team Developer, we use actually an application, it's a wizard, which will allow you to actually select the feature that you want to consume from this assembly and actually generate the interface or the code. For the people that are very familiar with Team Developer, legacy version or 5.2 before TD6 came, you have to, the features of this .NET Explorer wizard is very similar to the ActiveX Explorer, in which you just select a feature from the ActiveX or for a COM object, if you're doing automation, and you're just going to generate an interface so that you can call the feature that you're interested with. So the resulting ATL can be included in Team Developer. So this .NET Explorer will generate an ATL that you can include in Team Developer. So this is working both for .NET or Win32, and Win32 is what we're talking about today. So just have a look quickly about the .NET Explorer. It's very simple. So from the Tools menu, just going to select Net Explorer. On the next screen, you have the option GSE assembly or assembly file. I was talking about the GSE. We'll see an example about the custom assembly. So something that is not registered on the GSE. So you just can select what feature you want to use and which module, or to prefer which assembly you want to consume. Select the assembly to import. So once you selected that, you will be exposed with a if you select the GSE, you will see all the objects, all the assemblies that are registered on the GSE, and you're simply going to be able to select, whatever you want. In this case, the screenshot over here shows that we want to use XML from .NET. All right. Select class from the assembly. So once you select the XML assembly, you can have multiple classes exposed in this assembly, and the most important for document is XML document. So this is typically what you might want to take. You might be interested by some other XML elements, documents, and so on. Once this is done, what we're going to do is that we're going to generate an APL, and this APL, obviously, you're going to be able to include in your main application, right? And this going to represent actually the wrapper, because what is generated is in fact a wrapper to be able to call .NET Assembly. So this is a wrapper or interface that's going to be generated that you can include in your APL, in your main application. Compared to the compared to the ActiveX Explorer, you might know that it's automatically include the APL as soon as you do the generation. This is not the case with the .NET Explorer. You have to implicitly include the library. So not only an APL is going to be generated, but there's going to be an AXL file. I'm sorry to give you an acronym over here. I think I missed GAIL. It's Generate Assembly Library, I think, interface, sorry. AXL doesn't really have a name. I was discussing a bit about this. They come up with A for application, X for XML, because if you open this file, you'll see that it's actually an XML file. L stands actually for nothing. So just see it as an import XML file that gives the information of what has been imported. Actually, the AXL file is only if you consume assembly using a .NET target. In Team Developer 6, you have the possibility to consume, to create Win32 application as before, or .NET application. Since you are attending to the presentation right now, I suppose you are still interested in to use Win32, but consuming assembly. So the AXL file we see is not used. So what is an AXL file? It's automatically created by .NET Explorer after successfully generating a .NET proxy. It's written in XML, which I told already, contains the description of symbol being imported from the external assembly. Include the APL. The generated APL is not automatically included in your outline, as I mentioned. Manually include it in the library section. The APL contains a link to the AXL file so that it's included automatically when you include the APL. APL versus AX file. If you're building, as I say, Win32 build setting, just the code in the generate APL is used and the AXL is ignored. AXL is only when you have a .NET build target. If you're building with .NET build setting, just the symbol information of the AXL is used and the APL is ignored. So why do we have AXL and why do we have APL? Well, simply because the targets are quite different. This makes possible actually to have the same application, main application, to be simply switched from Win32 to a .NET target. So basically what I'm trying to say here in this slide is that if you consume assembly in Win32 and then wish to have a .NET target, you can do that without no problem. There's also some differences because the GAIL wrapper is actually a bit like the ActiveX. You might know about automation. There's also a library that allows you to call a COM object, with invoke method and all that. It's very similar. If you use a Win32 application and you're calling assembly, actually you are able to trace in the wrapper. If you're creating a .NET application, there is only the include file, the AXL file, the import file as an information to call the assembly, and obviously you cannot trace. So for that same reason, if you're using the coding assistant, you ain't gonna see, or the difference with Win32 and .NET project, .NET target will show you difference on the coding assistant. You will see some features or not depending on your build target, but it's not really a problem. So external assembly, the imported AXL file will not be located in the library section of the outline. So you can just check the new external assembly outline section, and after importing the APL, this is what you should see. So now we're gonna concretely talk about consuming .NET assembly in Win32, And this is, I did the white paper on the consuming assembly. So there is a white paper. I will show you the address if you want to further read about it, get more detail. And I had the idea first to use a feature because I'm quite new to .NET, as pretty much all team developer. I had a look at the BCL and I started to get interested about different core feature, like getting file version of a DLL or an executable. And I saw this example, although it's extremely simple, sometimes it's nice to have simple example just to make a point, was also interesting because the equivalent feature first doesn't exist in team developer. So the idea is that you want to use assembly or you want to use external function call or interfacing, because that's what we're talking about right now, to just get extra feature in your application. So file version, you cannot actually read file version in team developer application, but for the people that know the Windows SDK, Win32, they can call external function call and just get the same information. The problem though is that if you compare the two, the Win32 version of doing that with direct external function call versus assembly, it's much more complicated because you have complicated structure that you have to parse. While with the .NET assembly, it's a bit like COM, you just call the feature, give a file name, and you just retrieve the property that you're interested in. It's as simple as that. So Win32 is more complicated, I would say, so I'm very happy about that. And .NET generally makes the things more simple, and there are so much huge feature. So actually, just going back again in my web browser over here, just prepare it. So what we want to, I'm going to show you step by step how to use file version. So if you look at all these BCL things, I'm sure you're going to find your joy on what you want to use or the feature you want to have. For example, using registry, accessing the registry, generate GUI ID, or you name it. So it's always a good idea now for the people that use Team Developer 6, even though they're on Win32, to start to explore a bit the .NET framework, because you might find joy or what you like to do. So the BCL encapsulates core functionality to any .NET. So the only thing you have to remember is that it's extremely rich, and in a way quite simple to consume. All right. So the step one is just like to create a new application. So as I mentioned, with TD6 you can create a .NET application target, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about people interested about Win32 consuming assembly. So just as usual, create a standard exe. Then you use the .NET Explorer to select the system assembly from the GSE. So to consume our file information feature, we're going to have to select the system assembly, which contains default features. So you're going to have to go through the internet, know where the features are, because there are so much assemblies that you're really going to have to start somewhere, and this somewhere is start to read and look at on the MSDN. On the next screen, then you're going to select System.Diagnostics.File class, so that's just the feature I want to consume. When you're finished, the .NET Explorer, as I explained, will generate System APL and System AXL. Then you include the generate APL in your application. As soon as you do that, you're going to notice that the classes will start to show up, the ones that were automatically generated. So this is an invitation for you to start to instantiate objects, to start to actually consume your assembly. Notice that the functional class System.Diagnostics.FileVersion generated by .NET Explorer. So that's our main how can I say, our main object that we want to instantiate, so we can actually consume the feature. Actually, there are static constructor which will appear in as internal function, global function, versus non-static constructor, which you will have to call. The only thing over here anyway is just that, as with ActiveX, as soon as you generate something, you're going to have to instantiate some UDB. I'm saying here UDB because we're in Team Developer, so that you can call the functionality. Actually, here it's just a screenshot. We're going to see that in more detail. What I do over here is just open the file dialog, in which I give the possibility to check for exe and DLL, and then I just give call actually the constructor or something that will initialize the object that I'm interested with, just by giving the path of the exe. I want to check the version information. The rest are very simple. Those are just properties to get what we're interested about. So let me very quickly show you some example of that. So let me just go in my samples. Okay, so file info, gonna load that guy. Okay, so the project build settings. As I said, it was just a Win32 application. If you do a debug go, I'm expecting that everything is fine, that it's going to work, and actually it's working with. You know, I appreciate the fact that the example is quite simple, but I'm going to get into more detail in something I believe a bit more interesting. If you go in project build setting, actually, what I did consult is just the version information, you know, of the executable itself. So over here, the point that I just wanted to say is that we do have, you know, a Win32 application that consumes an assembly in a managed code. A very important notion, obviously, and I think here there's going to be a couple of questions, but the things are the way they are currently. You have to be able to deal when we're talking about assemblies, even when we talk about ActiveX, but here we talk about assemblies, about exceptions. So let me move that away. What you have for managing Win32 currently is the possibility to a global variable that you can set to on or to off, true or false. The default is true. This means that whenever you're going to get an error, you know, reported by the assembly, for example, in our file version, I could give a wrong a file that doesn't exist, I would expect to have an exception. So if you set the default, you're always going to have a dialog box, you know, being returned to you saying, hey, there is an error. You know, it's exactly the same if you consider ActiveX with the feature cell ActiveX auto error mode. If you enable this one, and if you don't call properly a method in an ActiveX object and something is not correctly initialized, you're going to have an automation error. Here you're going to have the exception being returned to you. So of course it's very desirable to be able to handle your own custom message at least, right? So if you want to do that, you're just going to have to set it to false so that there is no automatic report being done. At this point, you're going to use a function GAIL, get last error, which will allow you to actually see what kind of error you had. So I just gonna show you that. For example, in the pd-get file info, just show you the point over here. If I go here and if I do purposely something wrong, so I implement that and I'm gonna do a debug go. I'm gonna save that. What I'm gonna do is do the same, but now I have a wrong file which doesn't exist. Obviously, I get exception all over the place, right? So you don't want to have that, right? So you might want to turn it off, and if you do that, actually you can do that, and I implement that now. And if I do a debug go, okay, and if I do the same, then everything is silently ignored, right? So all the exceptions are swallowed, which is not very good. So, you know, when you're going to consume assemblies in Win32, the way you handle exceptions is done automatically. I would suggest or advise you to always leave it on by default, see everything is all right, and at this point, if everything is all right, I know that exceptions are something that are not supposed to happen, but if everything is all right, then turn it off eventually or leave it on, that's up to you. If you want to get a specific message, then you can get it, as I say, with get last error. The problem with that is that there is no way, for example, you can see that the method over here returns, you know, an object, right? On ActiveX, if we compare it with the ActiveX feature, all ActiveX method returns true or false, so be okay. With the .NET assembly, they have the proper signature, right? So all file info, if I initialize it with a wrong file, there's no way for me to check if the call was successful or not, because the object always going to be initialized. Even if I set it to object null, then I purposely call a wrong file, the raw file info always going to be initialized. So there's no really way for you currently to actually check for that. You would have to call the get last error if you turn off the auto error mode for each and every call you are doing. But it's a true and half problem, because generally some methods are important. Here's the constructor. If the constructor is not all right, Here you definitely want to check if everything's right. The rest should be definitely okay. All right. So this is about the exceptions. So let me close that. What's also important is user code. So if you have the Win32 application consuming assemblies, and if there are exceptions in those assemblies, your process don't gonna stop, right? Because it's code on the managed side. Difference with .NET type application. This is where it starts to be interesting. Is that if you build the .NET target, the way you handle exception are slightly different. You have a subnet exception message that you can use and actually to trap the exception by getting the error message without get-less exception. I know that we are busy working on better handling exception with when, for example, subnet exception. So that's going to be probably for 6.1. I'm not 100% positive about that. So this is about exceptions. Okay, now that I only talked, briefly about very simple things, there is one thing I wanted to show you, because file information is a beautiful example, in my opinion, to compare the difficulty of doing the same thing in Win32 100%. So that means interfacing external function call as opposed to consume assemblies. It really is amazingly much more simple. What I wanted to show you here is an application. Because we're in the database business, I think it makes sense that I do a bit something in this area. So let me get a very simple application here, right? So let's just run the application, then I go a bit in detail with it with the debugger, both sides actually, using Visual Studio 2010 and Team Developer. So if I do Go and if my Oracle database, all that is running fine, I actually call a store procedure, which is a ref cursor store procedure. It's a bit the equivalent for SQL, PLSQL command to return cursor or dynamic array. This is what you're doing when you're using, by the way, OLEDB or the .NET provider. What you have to do, there is no dynamic array return anymore with .NET or the .NET provider or OLEDB. What you're going to have to do is ref cursor. There's quite some literature about difference in that, right? So let me stop that. So basically, what I want to show you now is the same application. So this is the assembly that I was calling. I'm sorry, the name is a bit lousy. I just did it very quickly yesterday. I'll be honest with you, I didn't know what I wanted to show you, but I felt it was interesting to start to have a look to do something a bit more complicated. And I just came to the MSDN and I just saw that there was example how to call store procedure, right, in .NET from the Oracle point of view. I found some examples. There were mistakes, by the way, believe it or not, on the MSDN. I couldn't register the package, so I changed a couple of stuff over there. And the idea also is to return a data set. So basically what I did is to return a data set. I could go further on the sample, putting it neatly in the table window, parse through the XML file, but my apology, I didn't have the time yesterday. So here is the store procedure. As you can see, it's very simple. It just returns a ref curve, which contains the result of the query. And basically over here, so, let me do the following. I'm just going to do a attach to process, because the goal is to debug this assembly in live. So let me, I should attach to this guy here. Okay, so now if I do debug, you can see that I'm in debug mode. So if I go back again here, and if I do debug go, and if I do test GAIL, I break exactly in this point. So here, well, we don't comment on that because this will be part of another presentation eventually, is how to call store procedure in .NET. Believe me, I know about Oracle. I know how to search, but there is so much information, on the internet about .NET that you're always going to find example. And if you know how to put bits and pieces together, you're going to manage to be able to do something. I could have done nicer class, with different name, with a connect method, with a disconnect method, and if I continue go, I get the result here. So it's not a very complicated example, but it does something rather a bit more complicated and useful for us, accessing data from store procedure using .NET Assembly. So here you go. I mean, if you have people in your organization that develop like hell, on .NET, and you like to reuse that code, this is definitely a way for you to achieve that. All right. So now that we talked about that, let me close that. Deploying GAIL type application. As I mentioned, I'm in support. Matt, say that to you guys, and I know that a couple of people had problems to deploy a GAIL type application, for example, Windows XP. So I did have a look at it and find out a couple of things interesting that you might want to know before you call support or something like that. So first, have Windows XP Service Pack 3 machine updated. You install the .NET Framework 3.5 because per default this is not installed there. What you should also install is the Visual Studio 2008 redistributable file. For example, to have the dependency of MFVC RT90 DLL and some other one of the DLL. I didn't show it to you, but there is a DLL that does all the magic of calling the .NET Assembly in Win32, which is the GAIL wrapper, the DLL. So if you have a problem, it's already a good idea to drop it in dependency walker and see if something is missing. So then you install on this machine simply the deployment, the Win32 deployment. Let's say over here that you put it in deb60. I call it deb60, and by default, the installer generally proposes you to put this directory in the system path. Then next, you create a GAIL application. I call that a GAIL type application. So if people would say, well, I have problem with GAIL type application, I can directly understand that we are talking about consuming Win32, using Win32 application consuming assembly, as opposed to having a full .NET application. So that's why I like that word GAIL type application. So we just created an application. It's in the GAIL directory. And in order for this to work, you're going to have to call salcdkdll, unifytd.NET Explorer GAIL DLL, and unifytd runtime number date.dll. Those are assemblies because the deployer does not register them in the GSE, and because assembly doesn't care about your system path, right? So if you wouldn't have them, you would have problem, and I will show you that. If you don't want to have those dependencies in your application directory, and the system paths will not use them anyway from the deploy directory, which, by the way, those 3 DLL are already provided, right? So you just can drag and drop them in the GSE. So let me show you that. I just prepared it for machine. Let's just have a look. So here I have still my version information, right? I'm on the Windows XP Service Pack 3 that is updated. That's Framework 5.3 and the Visual Studio 2008 redistributable. And I just want to check if my assembly that I deploy works fine. I can guarantee you that there is no Team Developer 6.0 full product being installed, and I have no problem executing it. But what you might have as a problem is, for example, if I get rid of this guy here, so I have it on my system path, right? So I just move the salcdk. Why did I move it here, right? And if I try to do this, you can see that you get error, right? Because it's a dependency that you need to have. Even worse, if you would move this guy here, which is the main assembly, right? And you try to consume this, you get a crash, right? So what is very important is to have those assemblies, in the current directory, and the system path plays no role over there. I just like to say to you is that those assemblies are already readily available when you install the deployer. So if you don't want to have those dependencies in the GSE, over here you can see that the deployer installs absolutely nothing of Unify. So if I select those guys over here and move them, in the GSE, then move them out of that directory, which caused a crash before, or problems, normally I would expect, if everything is fine, that it works. So this is a way currently you can deploy on your GAIL type, so Win32 application consuming assembly on something like Windows XP Service Pack 3. So it's just little things that I wanted to tell you before you actually calling support. Now, for the limitation, both for Win32 and VPF target build, actually I say VPF, it could be .NET target build, visual object cannot be consumed using .NET Explorer. This is also both for .NET. If you build a .NET application or Win32, you just cannot use a visual feature. So it's only core feature or business object that you can use. If you want to consume visual object in TD6, you're going to have to build a .NET target, so a VPF. That's what the target you're going to do, and you're going to start to use VPF control things that we put in. What's nice though is that in TD6 you still can use visually ActiveX control, and in Win32 you can also do. By the way, over here the only thing I did is just talking about interfacing. In Team Developer 5.2 or legacy version, you had the 2 types of interfacing, actually 3, which is COM, ActiveX, which is direct external function call, and we can talk about Dynalib or APD. Now with TD.6, you have the joy to be able to use .NET Assembly and to try to dig into all those features for your best advantage. There is no proxy generation for method returning array of objects. So here's very important what I'm going to say, because yeah, we do have some limit currently, so no proxy generation for method returning array. There are a couple objects obviously that are going to do that. For example, I started to look at the registry, and I wanted to see how easy it was to browse into the registry, add key, and things like that. And all of a sudden, I find myself to go into a, I don't know if that exists, this term in English, a cul-de-sac. So it was a dead road, simply because I needed a method, and this method returned me an array. So before you start to jump, you know, and trying to consume the stuff, maybe it would be a good idea to go in the MSDN page that I show you and just have a brief look at different methods, you know, and see if you're not going to hit the limitation before you get disappointed and say, hey, I have a dead road over here. No proxy generation for generate object, events, and delegates. This is also important, but I would like to say something. You have a lot of people know .NET. You have a lot of programmers using .NET. Your organization probably use it already. I don't say that we should recommend to do wrappers and things like that, but you can always create, you know, yeah, a wrapper in .NET, so your own DLL in which you, inside the Visual Studio, for example, 2010, you would build a class and use the generate object and make some kind of wrapper to your developer to bypass this limitation. Now, proxy generation for .NET COM interrupt type of assembly. So this is because you have some type of assemblies that using .NET COM interrupt. I don't have one in my head right now, but you wouldn't be able to use the .NET Explorer. It would fail on you. Okay, more reading, HTTP Unified. So over here you have resources concerning Team Developer 6.0, not only for Win32, but for .NET. You also have many white paper samples, right? And I encourage you, obviously, to have a look at that guy here, right? So this page is quite important for you when you start to trial, or if you start to use Team Developer 6. So that's it. Anyone has questions?
All right, well, we'll open it up for the Q&A now. And I'm not sure if we have, let me look and see on our WebEx toolbar whether we have the a Q&A button. If not, then please go ahead and use the chat as well. And that's fine to post your questions. And again, just go to your WebEx toolbar, and you should be able to see a chat button. Yeah, I'm not seeing a Q&A button. So use the chat button. It's the one with the little caption image in the diagram. And send the chat, and we'll start going through the questions in just a minute. And it sounds like we have some folks unmuted, so let's see here.
No question?
Well, it doesn't sound like we have any questions. Obviously, a lot of great material to digest and look at. Want to remind everybody that there are opportunities. We recorded this, so we'll make a recording available to everybody. There are also opportunities to find out more about the web services portion through some of our other resources as well. We have samples. I believe you can find things on our wiki for TD6. And Jean-Marc, I don't know if you happen to know the link off the top of your head. I don't know the link off the top of my head for
actually the link that I gave also point to the wiki at some point, if I'm correct.
Okay.
I think it does point. I think it does point somewhere, isn't it?
Here we go.
Yeah.
Here we go. Thank you, Martin. Martin heard us here, and so he's putting this up so you can see that there is a wiki we have on TD6, but there's also some YouTube videos with tutorials. There's a blog that Martin Tietz does. Martin is our product manager for Team Developer, as well as many of our other products, where you can get some very much some free online resources on various topics, not just the web services. And we'll be featuring these more and more. You'll be seeing more information on these, but we want to make sure everyone's available of these resources so you can take advantage of them. Also, when you first bring up the wiki, you see the Unify Academy. That's actually where we have online training on Team Developer 6. And again, that's free as well. You just need to register for the Academy, and you can go through the training. There is a certification you can get if you'd like after the training. There is a $100 fee for going through the certification, I believe. But there's no cost to go through the training itself. That's available in that Unify Academy. And then other than that, stay tuned. We are just posting up the DevCons that we'll be doing this fall around the world. You'll see them in Europe in early November, and I think we're going to be setting the dates here in the next week or two for the ones in the Americas in late October. But you'll be seeing more on web services on the .NET side in particular in the 6.1 release that we'll be featuring in this year's DevCon in the fall at a location near you. Well, with that, if there's not any other questions, Jean-Marc, have you seen any questions come through on the chat?
I'm not very used to this webinar stuff, so I don't think so.
Okay. No, that's all right. You'd have a little chat thing blinking orange. So if you do have questions after you've had a chance to kind of digest all this wonderful information, please contact your sales representative, and we'd be more than happy to make sure we get you the information or point you to some of these resources we were just talking about that can probably provide some guidance and samples as well. Thank you so much for attending, and thanks again to Jean-Marc for a wonderful presentation and demo, and everyone have a great day. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.